Okay, we are live. We are recording. Phone lines are open. We are good to go.
Thank you, Matt. Hi, I'd like to welcome everybody to the East Hampton Town Trustees' last meeting of the year, December 13th, 2021. And we'd like to open with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Arlene, can you do roll call, please?
Sure. So John Aldred,
Yeah.
Ben Dollinger. I think I've seen him there. Ben, just let me know if you're here. Hi.
Hello?
Hi. Okay, so I will come back for Ben. Rick Drew,
Here.
Tim Garneau, absent. Jim Grimes.
He's coming in.
Okay. Mike Martinson,
Here.
Susan McGraw-Keeber,
Here,
Bill Taylor,
Here.
Francis Bach,
Here.
and I'll just double check Ben Dollinger. Okay, I'll keep my eye out for Ben, and Jim's coming in. Thank you.
I'm here.
Thanks,
Great.
Arlene. All right, we'll start with public comment. Is Tom Osborne here?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Tom. How are you?
Good.
All right, so Tom is here on behalf of the owner of 141 Merchants Path, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-155-01-36.3 to be granted legal access easement to their property over Trustee Road.
Francis, this is Rick. I met with Mr. Osborne at the subject property, and we had a good meeting, and I think we really clarified some of the questions that were outstanding. The subject property takes access currently from Town Line Road, where they would have the provision for a 700-foot easement requiring a significant amount of clearing of vegetation and disturbance. Here, we have an existing trustee easement which gets them about halfway to their property. Then we have an existing 3-lot subdivision that could get them the last 100 feet or so if one of the property owners will grant them an easement. If not, our easement will allow them to use their own easement and require about 100 feet of clearing. So the option of using the trustee easement in conjunction with either the neighbor's existing driveway or their own easement with what I would call minor to moderate clearing does appear to be a better solution in this case, particularly from an environmental perspective of having to do a fair amount of clearing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we got during our meeting. And, I think that this is a better solution than having them come in from Town Line Road. And Chris took, a lot of time to look this over and point out how it would create almost like a funnel to the right side of the trustee easement. So I don't think the neighbors are going to want to have somewhat of a dysfunctional driveway when they could very easily just grant an easement over it.
Mhm.
But the worst case with this scenario is still far better than the alternative off of Town Line Road. Thank you.
If I could, Rick, since we met, we had some further title work done.
Okay.
And actually, John Leonard did put in place the extension of the easement so that we don't need to do anything further with the neighbor. So the plan,
excellent.
yeah, I was surprised, nice surprise.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the plan would be to use the existing asphalt driveway and access our lot over the existing dirt driveway. No clearing would have to be done.
That's great. And there's
And
a
we
nice
get
little
rid of
stone
that.
wall there too. There's a nice existing stone wall.
Don't have to trash the wall.
Yeah, it's a pretty little wall. So,
Certainly.
You want to make a recommendation, Rick?
yeah, I mean, I'd like to make a motion to approve it. I think it's a far better alternative, and with this latest information, it's really a clean shot.
Yeah,
So-
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Tom, you got your easement?
Thank you. Thank you. Happy holidays, everybody.
Okay.
Yeah,
Hey,
Merry
take
Christmas.
care.
Bye-bye, Tom.
Thanks, Rick. That was, thanks for working with that one.
Yep, no problem. That was a good one.
Yep, thank you.
All right, next we have Rich Briley. Rich, you here?
Yes, he is.
I am.
Okay. On behalf of the owners of 19 Chauncey Close, Suffolk County Tax Map 301-15-1-6. Update on a temporary construction dewatering project. New water sample results.
So we did get the results and we did reach out to Chris Gobler as well as our environmental engineer that we have on board. We did a test. Each one of them did a test. I'm waiting for Regina to sign on.
I just signed on.
Okay. So Regina is with PW Grosser. They are the environmental engineers on the project, and she can answer any questions that you might have. I don't know. I think I sent you all the letter from Regina with that explanation, which is quite long. I understand that, but maybe Regina can simplify it for us all a little better.
I mean, Rich, you and I have been working on this one for a while, and I've come to a couple of points that maybe I can share, and then Regina can maybe color in, where I think we've gotten to. It seems like when the pond is open, the dewatering system works pretty well as designed because the overall water table is lower. So,
Correct.
That seems like a huge piece of information for us to be considering in this overall process. And it also seems that when the pond is open, if direct dewatering is to be considered, it might be mitigated better with the pond open and a higher salinity level. So those are a couple things that keep kind of resonating with me and coming back to the surface as I've tried to process this. And the results, are a little different, between the first set of tests and the second set of tests. The second set of tests seem to be a little more favorable. And it would be nice to get a better understanding of the differences between the two sets of tests that were done. And I think it might enlighten our board members if Regina could help us to better understand. Dr. Gobler's original report to us didn't seem to have all the details that at this point in time may be helpful. And I don't know if Regina has all those pieces of information, whereas the second report seemed to have more specifics on the pond versus the dewatering system in quantitative terms. So if Regina could maybe, help with a couple of those points, about the water table level, the pond being open, and the differences between the two sets of tests, maybe that's a good place for us to start.
And if I could just interrupt before Regina does speak, I just want to reemphasize that what we're asking is not to pump continuously over this period. The situation that we have, and that's why the letting of the pond has a lot to do with it, is that what we have are 3 diffusion wells, and that's where we're pumping water to right now. Those diffusion wells periodically need to be serviced. In order to service them, we need to shut the system down, which then floods the excavation. So it looks like right now, the only time we would need to pump into the pond would be when these pumps need to be serviced, and that is for a period of about a day and a half. We've done this service on these diffusion wells twice already, and it's in both times it's taken a day and a half, start to finish. So that is essentially, what we're asking, to be able to do that during the servicing of these diffusion wells so that we don't have to compromise the construction.
Hey, Rich, can I expand on that for a sec? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, how are you? Good. So back up a little. So you said the timeline needed to pump the water is a day and a half. For us, I think as a board to approve anything like this, we're going to need some real parameters set in place. So we're going to want to know how long water is going to be pumped into the pond. We're going to want to know how much water is going to be pumped into the pond, and also for how, and would you know when these services will need to happen too? So I don't think we could just approve just an open-ended set of guidelines, without having some structure to it.
Absolutely. So we do have that information. I think originally we did talk about that. We do have the amount of water. We do know approximately within, I would say 2 days at the most, between a day and a half. The day and a half looks like the period of time, and then 2 days would be, probably max. And as far as how many and how often we'd have to do this, that's kind of an unknown. Typically now we've had to do it. It seems like we have to do it when the pond is up over 3.5 feet for a period of time. And I don't know, do we have Kyle Allen on?
I believe
Yes, I'm here.
he's here. Oh, there he is.
Yeah,
So
I'm
Kyle
here.
might be able to speak to that a little better, since Kyle's with Chesterfield Associates. They're the contractor that own the system.
Yeah, so we've actually serviced the wells once over the past 3 months. And prior to that, towards the end of the summer, before the pond was let, we did it once, maybe in June, and then I think again at the end of August. So I think if the water level stays down where we're at now and stays consistent, we'll probably only have to do it once over the course of the next 4 months is when we're projecting the construction to take place and how long we need the system for. And we're pumping 650 gallons per minute right now consistently into those 3 diffusion wells. So we would just transfer that 650 gallons per minute into the pond. So I think that's 33 million gallons and change over the course of a day and a half.
What's the time frame on when the project should be finished? Well, I mean, the need to pump finished.
We're looking at, weather permitting, we'd probably be done sometime around beginning of May.
Okay, because Patrick Bistrian just got the bid to dredge the pond. So you could coordinate with him to make sure the pumps are, fully serviced right before, while the pond is open.
We just did that last week.
In a couple months, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but anyhow, you should coordinate with him and find out what, when the pond is going to be open.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have 2 questions. First question is, what did you do with the water last time you serviced the diffusion wells? And the second question is, in order to dispose of excess water into the pond, I'm assuming you would need a modification of the dewatering permit you have now. And my question is that correct?
Yes. Well, to your first question, we shut the system down and the excavation was flooded. But we're not at a critical point right now where that caused any setback.
Okay.
But moving further down the road, it will. And then, yes, we have already applied for a modification with the DEC. And they have come back from, and maybe Regina can speak to this a little clearer, but my interpretation of Helen Chang's response is that they are favorable to it, but they want to know how the trustees feel before they give us the green light.
That was my understanding as well. In fact, Helen had sent over what I think is some preliminary draft parameters for some of the nutrients that may be detected at the pond or in the groundwater. She did request that we collect a sample for total coliforms, which we have collected and do have the results back. We just got them today.
So Rick, you've talked to Helen Chang fairly recently. Right. Is your understanding of her feeling as well?
Well, she was interested in getting the second set of results. She's never spoken to me about the need for a trustee approval being first. I'm sure it would give her a greater comfort level, as it seems like no one really wants to be the first one out the door on this one.
No, the trustees, I mean, the DEC won't give out a permit for somebody else's property. They need the permission of the property owner before they'll consider giving you a permit. That's probably what's holding it up.
Right. Well, I think we have done things, where we've said it was subject to getting the other regulatory agency permit. So it certainly wouldn't be a precedent-setting move for us to put something together contingent upon the DEC permits. So I don't have a big holdup personally from us trying to do something. I think the question mark I have is what I started with in my opening comments to Rich regarding the differences in the two sets of reports and just getting a little bit better understanding of that information, and trying to use the opening of the pond as a mitigation tool here to ensure that what we're doing doesn't have any negative impacts on the water quality in the pond, particularly because for the past 6 years, we've all been pretty determined and committed to improving the water quality in the pond. So I think that's still the primary criteria, is that, we, like a surgeon, we do no harm to the pond. And if we're doing something that's on the borderline, how would we mitigate that? And that we have accurate information. And like I said, the real piece that I think we can work with opening the pond and keeping the level low. I think there's an opportunity to do that. I just think we don't have a real clarification of the, I don't know if the word is accuracy or consistency of the test results, so we understand exactly what we're doing when we pump water directly into the pond. And Regina, if this is a good opportunity for you to weigh in on that, that would be great. But at the end of the day, what is the contribution of nitrogen, phosphorus, ammonia, which seem to be the big three that are coming to the surface regarding the efforts to dewater directly into the pond?
Rick, can I clarify one thing that you said?
Sure.
Our ability to keep the pond open will have to be in conjunction with the project. We have two opportunities to open it on our own. We have the traditional opening in the spring and the traditional opening in the fall. We also have this permit for the project. We don't have an opportunity outside of those.
Okay, thank you, Francis. I know there was something with the Fish and Wildlife with a more flexible opening, but I don't think it would have
Hey, Francis.
Yeah.
Francis, I think if you actually go back to our permit, I'm pretty sure the language allows us to make a determination and do an opening out of that spring and fall opening. The only thing that's restricted that in the past is actually it's typically been occurred during the time when the plovers are nesting. So, we actually have, and we've done that many times, is opened the pond like we did it this year. We opened it in October, and the pond closed right back up, and a month later we reopened it, and that was fully within bounds of the permit.
Yeah. No,
However, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but we really wouldn't have the opportunity to open the pond again after we did this traditional spring opening.
No, well, John, just to bring everybody up to speed on the schedule over here, is typically the dredging, the winter dredging, starts with the letting of the pond. The water levels dropped, and then it's to the contractor's discretion whether they close that let to do the dredging or whether they leave the pond open. In either case, the normal situation here is they close the let for the convenience of being able to transfer the sand to the east. But the project always finishes with them letting the pond, and they leave. Basically, we try and time this so that we catch it before the end of March, before the presence of the piping plovers.
So that's your window, Rich.
Yeah, so I mean that is helpful, and it does work within our schedule. But there's something else too, and maybe, like I say, I'm not the water expert here, but I know I can say that the water that we are pumping out of the ground is water that would migrate into the pond either way, whether we pump it or not. It's groundwater that moves in and out of the pond. So it's not like we're taking water from another source and pumping it into the pond. It's essentially pond water that's migrated into the ground. And as the pond rises and falls, that water moves horizontally in and out of the pond as well. So I understand the need for testing and testing the water that we're pumping for these different nutrients, but and I think that, Regina can confirm that the readings that we're getting from the pond water are very similar to what we're getting, and the water I think that we're getting is slightly better since it's being filtered. Regina, would you agree with that?
Just looking up at our samples. Our samples that we collected, the last set of samples that we collected at the same time that Dr. Gobler's office collected samples are relatively the same. Ours look slightly better, but that could be for ammonia and orthophosphate. That could be a difference in the type of analysis that each lab did. Unfortunately, we weren't able to completely duplicate the effort because different labs are used.
Yeah. I mean,
but
it sounds like.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Bill.
It just seems to me that the point that gentleman just made is the most important one, is that the water going into it's going to be pumped into the pond is water that was headed for the pond. We're not really changing anything in the water. The water that will be pumped into the pond is just going to get there on a slightly different schedule than it normally would have.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you might get a little bit of filtration through the soils with groundwater over time. So, you'd probably see a little bit of natural filtering. I don't think it's a huge improvement. But just to get it on the record, I mean, the data, Regina, as I understood it, from Stony Brook was 1510 micrograms per liter for nitrate from the settling tank, and 255 in the pond itself. Ammonia, 44 in the settling tank, 31 in the pond. Orthophosphate, 2.04 in the settling tank, 103 in the pond. Fecal coliform, 0 in the settling tank, and 53 in the pond. And your results were pretty similar to that. maybe a little higher on the nitrate, a little lower on the ammonia. And, again, the fecal was really low. So, not startling numbers by any stretch. I just, getting the original data from Dr. Goldberg, there was, quite a difference between the two sets of data. That's the only thing that's kind of sticking out in my mind is why is there such a difference between the two sets of tests?
Well, I can say that for the original test that Dr. Gobler did, rather than analyzing for ammonia, the lab analyzed for ammonium, which is a different analyte. So there's that difference. There was also it seemed that there was a high level of fecal coliform at the time in the settling tank, which should not have been the case. And so we suggested that Rich and Kyle disinfect that tank. And once they disinfected it and covered it, we haven't had that problem either with the orthophosphate or the fecal coliform. So that leads us to believe that we were probably, using a tank that was, in need of cleaning.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the only thing left is really the nitrogen levels, which he said were quite a bit higher in the original test. So that's the only outlier at this point. I don't know if you have any further comment on that one.
I'm just looking through the data now. So are you referring?
Yeah, his first report to us said that the nitrogen levels were 20 to 25 times higher in the settling tank than in the pond. And, again, just kind of quite a difference.
Well, hey, Rick, you know what I might attribute that? And listen, I'm not going to vote on this, guys, because we're involved in this project. But at the time that those initial tests were done, we just saw a condition down there with open soils, dry conditions, soils blowing around. And I'm going to hazard to guess that those water tests were impacted by the accumulation of just dust in that settlement tank, which is nutrified. This is soil coming off the ground there that in all likelihood probably had some impact on the results of these tests.
Yeah, no, I like the fact that we have two sets of data here that are coming in pretty tight, Jim, on the last round.
Yeah, well, I think,
that's an improvement.
Yeah, I thought what was unfortunate the first time the testing was done, it wasn't a very good control because you had a piece of equipment that certainly did service on other projects that had not been sanitized, as the engineer mentioned. And you had the other condition of where there was multiple opportunities for nutrients to get introduced into this settlement tank, other than coming out of the dewatering process itself.
Yeah. Hey Jim, I do have a question for you because you spoke to this earlier in the meeting, or if you're still there.
Yeah, no, I'm still here.
All right. So we have the dredging project where the pond can be managed to some degree. We have the traditional spring opening, which allows the pond to be managed to some degree from a water level perspective. And you feel that within the framework of our permit, we probably could have one more at bat to open the pond in a pinch if we had to?
I'm not sure that we're not really relegated to not open it. The way we're set up right now is if we deem for the health of the pond that we need to make an additional opening, or if it's in conjunction with our dredging permit, we can really open that pond more or less at will. I mean, if we open it and let's say that letting fails in a short period of time, we've got the latitude to basically have another crack at it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Well, so what I'm hearing, Jim, is that come end of March, we open the pond and the cut closes. You're saying we could then reopen it.
Well,
but
John,
but I don't think we could reopen it indefinitely.
No. Hey, John, here's the deal. Okay. on a typical season, and this is lining up like a typical season. We've done the bidding process for the dredging. We have a successful contractor there. We have not yet coordinated when they plan on doing their work, but typically that's going to get initiated sometime mid-January or such. Okay, once that work starts, it starts by letting the pond. Okay, the pond is going to be reliably low from the moment the contractor starts the dredging until the end of March. Okay, because if it is too high, the contractor is going to be keeping, letting the pond just to expedite his work. So it's a given that water level is going to be low from middle of next month through at the very least the end of March. Okay, once we get to the end of March, it's hands off. We've got to stay out of there because of the plovers. So if the pond closes up and the water levels come up, which it typically will, it's not going to come up overnight. It's not, it doesn't happen too fast. Even with the spring rains, it takes it a good while for that pond to peak out.
What do you think about, just spitballing here for a minute, some type of a parameter that ties the direct dewatering into the pond level or the pond being open? Something where, we are using this as part of a control process.
That we're using the letting as a control process?
Yes.
Well, here's
to permit the dewatering to occur into the pond.
Okay. I'm not sure that the two can be joined at the hip like that, because if we're talking about, the only way that works is if you're asking to let the pond independently of our dredging process. And if we're looking to do that, I don't think from a permitting standpoint it's an issue. It's really a financial issue.
Right. Yeah, because Rich's original ask was to do it for up to 2 days, for the cleaning process. And I realize there may be another situation where, it needs to occur. But if it is on a more limited basis, it seemed like, things could line up like that. On paper, I realize that's not the real world, but it gives us some kind of a starting point here.
I mean, it's quite possible with the pond being down for that period of time, it puts a lot less stress on the system. It's possible that we may not need to service these diffusion wells, but we can't be 100% sure about that. There's too many unknowns. So that's why, we'd like to have this as an option should we have to shut the system down and do this service. And like I said, it would be for 2 days and a half.
Right. So when the pond's not let, could we control the volume to be tied in just to maintenance? And if the pond is let, maybe you'd have a little more flexibility.
No, because the only way to service these things is to shut the whole system down.
Right. Right. But you would be able to dewater because we would tie it into when the pond is let.
Well, yeah. If we'd be able to dewater as long as we could pump into the pond.
Right, with the pond let. So those two things are kind of joined at the hip.
Okay.
And then you'd have like a limit on what you could do when the pond wasn't let if you were in a pinch and you didn't want to get the basement be damaged, so to speak. You know what I mean? So that there's a little bit of kind of give and take here and some control. So if the pond's not let,
the pumping into the pond it's not going to have as much of an effect on the pond as you think. I don't think it would be even negligible. And I think Kyle has done some research on this and maybe he can back me up on this, but for the amount of water that we'd be pumping over that 2-day period would not be negligible. It's not something you'd see. You wouldn't see the pond come up in any measurable amount.
Right. No, it just seemed that the water quality and the testing showed that, the pond being wet was a better time to dewater into it.
With the salt water being.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To try to, do it so we minimize impacts and have some guidelines to, provide a framework for this that gives us a little bit of management.
Yeah. That would be a tough one for us to try and schedule, because if these diffusion wells start to become compromised, they sort of have a mind of their own.
Okay. So it's not a scheduled maintenance, it's a required maintenance based on conditions.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So they have pressure gauges on them. And when they build up back pressure, it tells us that they're reaching their limit. And we don't like to get anywhere close to 10 PSI on the back pressure. So when we're cruising around like 6-7 PSI, that's when we know that we're going to need to redevelop them, as we call it, where we pull up the wells and clean them off.
How much lead time do you have for that?
It's usually like a week. Unfortunately, it compounds pretty quickly. I mean, it can go from 4 PSI to 7 PSI in 2 to 3 days,
Right. But that could give us an opportunity to let the pond.
Right. And I mean, I'm not sure how this works, but if we could pump into the pond and then you let the pond 2 days later, I'm sure that would be negligible as well. It doesn't need to be open at the same time that we pump in there, right?
I'm not sure, but it certainly would be nice to have them close.
Right.
Yeah. It seems to me that this scenario could be worked with. The part that concerns me is after March 31st. And you said that your estimated time of finishing is beginning of May. So that's the period that would concern me. After the pond is closed, you're talking about a month to 6 weeks in which you might want to discharge into the pond. We can't open the pond. And you have really elevated nitrate levels pumping in there, 33 million gallons pumping into a shot into the pond. Is that going to impact any bloom activity that might be taking place at that particular time? That's more of my concern, and I don't feel qualified really to make that assessment, but I think that question should be posed to somebody who does.
Yeah. I think one of the things we should ask you to look at strongly would be, it's definite that the pond is going to be open and let at the end of March. And I think you should schedule it to have your pumps during that open time toward the end of March. You should just do a maintenance, get your pumps running in top gear. Yeah, preventive maintenance. Just make sure that at the end of March, those you get in, that they've recently been done. They should run for another 6 weeks then without a problem, right?
The only way we'd be able to do that is if we were able to pump into the pond.
Right.
What if you had a long extended outflow hose and reached across the pond to the ocean? Is that possible?
It's not practical.
Not practical.
Yeah, I don't think that'd work.
But Kyle, given that the pond is open and there's and given that there is a consensus on the board that with the pond open, there's a comfort level with some form of direct pumping, I think Bill's point becomes very valid.
Yeah.
That there are going to be opportunities where you guys can be proactive. And it doesn't mean that a week later, you're not going to have to do it again, but at least we're taking our best foot forward and working together to build conditions in a permit that's in the best interest of the pond.
Yeah, I agree. I like that too. Because after they're redeveloped with the pond level down, that gives us a lot more flexibility to move more water into the wells as well. So I like that train of thought.
And hopefully we don't get hammered with rains in April and stuff. I mean, the wild card, as John said, I think very correctly, is what happens in April. And I don't know if you guys can go kind of balls to the walls here and get as much done as possible, before April with the foundation and maybe reduce the amount of pumping requirements later in the project.
Yes.
I don't know your project schedule, but
Right.
certainly it would be nice to get as much done as possible when we have control.
Yeah,
Because-
yeah, you should, the one situation you should worry about is having some plovers show up on April 2nd and plopping down there. I mean, you want to be in the best possible shape to totally stay off that beach by the 31st of March.
Well,
That's what you should be shooting at.
yeah, Bill, it doesn't matter, okay? Because by the 31st of March, our permit is shut down. Our permit does not give us latitude to do anything
No.
past the 31st of March. Doesn't matter whether the plovers are there or not.
Okay, so can I conclude that as long as we schedule our diffusion well service in conjunction with the pond letting in March, we could pump into the pond and not have to shut down the system? That sound?
I mean, I think that could be a parameter of a permit. I think the board has to get a little further along with its deliberations, Rich.
Mhm.
But
I would say that if the board, if that's our consensus, that maybe the next step is to relay that feeling to Helen Chang and have a discussion with her about what she's looking for from the trustees. Because maybe she's looking for that kind of guidance from us, so she knows where to zero in on her assessment of the situation from her standpoint. I'm not sure what she's looking for.
yeah, because she does want to consider conditions and parameters. She has alluded to the fact that water quality will dictate flow levels and things that would be potential components of a DEC permit. So, John, I do think that's a logical next step. And, it's just a little tricky for our board not deliberating for quite a while in terms of the impact on the applicant, but maybe there's a way to have some kind of a meeting that would allow something to happen sooner than a month from now. But, just kind of spitballing here, that I think that there are a few more steps to this, but it may just require getting some feedback to the applicant in less than a month's time.
Well, my thought is the applicant needs something from the DEC. And it
Correct.
seems like the DEC is looking for something from us.
Mhm.
It's almost more that the DEC is looking for something from us than the applicant's looking for something from us.
Right. No, that's a critical path item for sure.
So,
it seems to me that if we have a discussion with the DEC, which we can do, we don't have to do that as a full board.
Right.
And we can inform their process of deliberating about their permit better. So I don't see that it's a problem if we can't vote on something officially until, early January, as long as the DC has an idea of what we're thinking of.
Right.
And then
give them some guidance.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think that's a logical next step. I don't know how the other board members, maybe someone else wants to weigh in. Ben, you're a committee member on the pond. But I have a comfort level with giving that kind of guidance to the DEC and then getting their feedback, and then the board can deliberate formally once we have, the next communication.
Yeah, I agree, Rick. I think we're forming a clear path to making a good decision here with all the information that's coming in. Okay. And I think a lot was figured out through this discussion as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
Understanding the scope of work and just working together, both parties, in making it happen.
Rich, what do you think from your side of things? Is that going to help us kind of move this along a little bit and let the DEC do their job? And what is their time frame typically? Is within 30 days, you think you'll hear back from Helen, and then this board can then reconvene?
Yeah, I expect to hear back from Helen in a few days. I mean, we have somebody that's been in contact with her. She's generally pretty responsive.
Yeah, no, she was very nice to work with.
Yeah. We
Do
have something to her right now. We sent a couple of emails today.
The DEC wants to know from the property owner if project is that requesting a permit is okay with them. So I think the DEC, we could probably give the applicant that permission tonight to proceed with that we're fine with them proceeding with the DEC permit process. And we'll make a final decision whether we approve the project after the DEC and us trash it out. But as the property owners, we are okay with you applying to the DEC for a permit that involves our property.
I would second that. I would support that, Bill.
Yeah, I would too, Bill. It's a good idea.
So I'll try to make it a motion. Can we vote on it then?
I would approve it too, but I don't know if they need our permission to apply for a permit.
Right. I don't think we need to vote.
Well, just that we've been hearing that they want us to weigh in first. So I think Bill and John and I think Ben and I also are suggesting let's give that kind of nod, a soft approval here, and see what they come back with, and then we can formally, as a board, formally.
Yeah, any DEC permit I ever tried to get there's a place in the application that wants to know if you have the property owner's permission.
Yeah, I granted. I would just like to speak with trustees.
I think we should say that
the trustees speak to the DEC directly as well.
Yeah, we're approving the application, and we're approving the application to the DEC. And get the process rolling. And it doesn't mean we're approving the project.
It's a step in the right direction.
Okay, so I don't know if we really need to do that. I mean,
well, it'll help us make the next step with the DEC. It'll help us move along with them.
Okay, but we still have to reach out to them ASAP and start the conversation, John.
Right.
No, I think that, the representatives of trustees should speak to the DEC as soon as possible and just relay what we're talking about tonight as we've kind of developed our feelings tonight. So they hear it directly from us. I mean, I think I'm comfortable,
I agree. So we'll commit to having a conversation with them, Rich. Okay. We'll reach out tomorrow to set something up.
Fantastic.
And we'll go from there.
Hey, Rich, I just have one quick question. When you guys have to shut the system down, how many days of pumping does that set you back when the system's off?
Just a day. It takes about 24 hours for it to come back down to where we can work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you think best case scenario, you guys can't be done by end of March if all goes well? A reach?
So tough to call. We're talking about two of the worst weather months of the year.
Yeah. Yep.
We'll be pushing for that.
Mm-hmm.
But if we get a mild winter, we'll obviously make more progress than if we get a 2-foot snowfall.
Yeah. Okay. And then the movie theater section is more problematic than the main foundation, correct?
It is.
It is. And are you looking to phase that out or do it all in one shot, or what?
Looking right now, it looks like it'll work in our schedule for when in mid-January when the pond is let.
Mm-hmm.
That'll help us in that area because it drops the pond a little further and gets us right where we need to be.
Okay. Gotcha. Thanks.
So we're going to jump on the theater during that time and catch it back up to the rest of the house.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. Anything else we have to do with this? You good?
Thanks
with
very
it,
much,
Rick?
Fred. Yeah.
You
Thank
good
you
with
very
it?
much. Mhm.
Okay.
Who will I hear from? Will I hear from Rick or?
You'll hear from one of us, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I would hope that you'd hear from us by the end of the week.
That'll be great. Terrific.
All right. And we'll just convey that we seem to be going towards approving this under certain conditions.
Mhm.
And hopefully we can get this all worked out for the next meeting.
Great.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, Rich.
Yes.
Night now.
All right. All right. Next, we have Steve Warner and Rick Whalen, presentation on Trustee Historic Research. Rick and Steve,
Okay.
how are you?
Hello, good evening, good night, good evening to all. All right, so what we did, do you all have the PDF that I sent over to the end of the afternoon that I sent to Arlene? Does everybody have the report?
Everybody, it was emailed to everybody.
As a PDF?
Yes.
Yeah, then that should be the up-to-date and most up-to-date and complete version with hopefully no typos in it.
Yeah, well,
All right, so let me just start that.
it's understandable.
Good. So what we did with Steve doing most of the research on this, the two of us went and looked at the coastal areas. We're going to go back to my GIS. I'm following this along the GIS. We looked at the coastal areas of East Hampton Town and the Sag Harbor and Northwest Woods area, basically from Sag Harbor 2 and even beyond Cedar Point. And the idea was to figure out on beaches and waterways, things, of a tidal nature, whether we know what the trustees own and don't own, or, and with what level of certainty. So as you saw in the report, we kind of approached this from the Sag Harbor area and then moved eastward from there. So why don't I try to do that? And if anyone has any questions or if Steve wants to jump into, let me just try to summarize what we did in the report. So first of all, Sag Harbor, there's kind of two areas I'll call Sag Harbor. One is from Long Wharf to Conklin Point. That's a relatively short area. Conklin Point is the base of the Sag Harbor Breakwater, and that's where Corps Maria is located. And between Long Wharf, the base of Long Wharf is really about at the town division line. Between Long Wharf and Corps Maria, or Conklin Point, except for a very, very small area on the Corps Maria property, there is no beach. It's all marinas, bulkheaded, dredged, excavated. So we're not talking natural beach. And whatever underwater land was there, the trustees did quite often, actually, in the 1800s, deed or lease so-called water lots in that area, some of which were filled. So there doesn't appear to be any remaining trustee ownership west of Conklin Point. East of Conklin Point, the next section is east of Conklin Point to the mouth of Little Northwest Creek. So let's sort of start at the beginning here. The trustees, and even before the trustees, everyone knows the trustees were formed as an entity in 1686 by the Dongan Patent, but there were some lands in the town of East Hampton that were conveyed out before the trustees even existed. But by 1686, the majority of the town was still in public ownership. So in 1686, excluding Montauk, the trustees still owned most of what we know as East Hampton Town. And so most titles since then does derive from the trustees. And what the trustees would do is they would go through allotments. Allotments is when anyone who was a resident of the town with a claim on the original resources, I'm not going to get too complicated here, but they would make grants or allotments of land in accordance with each individual's commonage. So let's just take the original settlement of the town. Let's say there's, I don't know, 20, there were less than 24 people originally, but it was soon that number or more. Those people contributed monetarily towards the foundation of the town. And so each person had a certain amount of what was called commonage, a certain acreage from the inception of the town. And you could buy more, you could contribute in a greater degree, but whatever the commonage that you had when land allotments were made, you got land in proportion to your commonage. So some people obviously had a higher percentage of the investment in the town's funding, and when land allotments were made, they got a higher proportion of the allotments. The early allotments, many of the early allotments prior to 1736 are not recorded or not fully recorded in the town records. Sometimes there are records of an individual and it tells where they got their land, but we can't piece all that together. We don't always know, which of the allotments, we don't have a complete record of each of the first, let's say, 10 or so allotments. In 1736, and between 1736 and 1748, the trustees basically did the big fire sale. All right. There were five or six major land allotments in that period, beginning with the biggest of them all, which was in 1736, the 10-acre allotment. Again, 10 acres meant for every acre of commonage that you owned in the town, you were going to get 10 acres for that acre of commonage out of this big, massive allotment, which is believed to have encompassed around 7,000 acres of the town. And that's in 1736. And in those allotments between 1736 and 48, there are pretty good records. I mean, there are not always, you can't always figure out exactly where you are, but by and large, they left reasonably good records. And oftentimes, particularly where there were border bodies as a boundary, you can know where you are. So in the Sag Harbor area, there was only one parcel in the Sag Harbor area in the 10-acre allotment in 1736 that was on reach to the water. That was Lot 40, or part of Lot 40, because Lot 40 actually had two separate components, an inland lot and a waterfront lot, I think of about 130 acres. And that lot was bounded by the beach. We don't know exactly where it was. We know it's in Sag Harbor, so it's somewhere east of the town boundary line, and is west of Little Northwest Creek. And it was the parcel in question went to Daniel. It's in the report. I can't remember. Daniel, but it was bounded by the beach. We just, so for those who don't know this, if you bounded an allotment that was bounded by the beach or by the bluff or the cliff, our assumption is that means it didn't go to the water. That means the trustees were retaining the beach or the bluff and the beach. So that would indicate that maybe the original allotment or allotments, maybe the trustees didn't bring it right down to the water, but that's the only one that we have, and we don't really know precisely where it was located. The more modern conveyances, and this is where Steve has got a lot of work done. Some of it so recently I haven't read all the deeds yet, but in the area between, let's say, Havens Beach and Sag Harbor and Little Northwest Creek, that encompasses the so-called Sands subdivisions, Sag Harbor Hills, Sag Harbor Beach Club, Azure Rest, Nineveh Beach. The modern deeds and the modern subdivision maps uniformly go to the water line. Okay, they always go to Sag Harbor Bay. So the way we handle that in the report is our conclusion is the ownership of the beach in that area is inconclusive. It's possible that if we were able to trace back further in time, we might find other earlier allotments that went to the beach and not to the bay. But the more modern conveyances, meaning from the late 1800s to the middle of the 20th century, all the allotments go to the water. For example, the subdivision maps, the Sands subdivision maps, all the file maps show the upland owner going right down to the shoreline. So we rate that as inconclusive. We certainly can't establish that the trustees own the beach there, but I'm also not going to rule it out. Any questions about that? That's the sort of the Sag Harbor area as far as Little Northwest Creek.
I just have a question, Rick. At the time those subdivision maps were made, was there title insurance involved? So was there title searches done back?
The answer, I'm sure, John, almost certainly the answer is yes. We don't have access to that because that, you know, we don't record a title report. But you're talking mid 20th century. It would be very common to have title reports. Yes.
How far back would it be common? Or at what point wouldn't it be common to have title?
I would say the most of the 20th century, probably till the early 1900s. Now we have one of the guys who wrote about this issue was a fellow named Harry Slate. And if you read the town records, Harry Slate was one of the historians who writes the introductions in the 1920s, the volumes that were published in the 1920s. Slate was wrote the introductions and some other excerpts to the town volumes. He was a member of the family that owned most of that land before it got developed. Now, his family sold it in 1925. Slate claims, now you can take this with, a grain of salt because he was, his family were the landowners, but he claims that their ownership ran to the high water mark all along. So that would take it back to maybe the late 1800s. But we don't know because if, in the 17 or 1800s, and this is the issue, somebody with waterfront property or quote unquote waterfront property that went to the beach where the trustees were originally retaining and reserving the beach, if in their next conveyance they just describe it as bounded by the bay instead of bounded by the beach, who's going to know, right? And especially in those days, who would pay much attention to it?
Yeah, but hey, Rick, the conveyances to the Slate family, was that conveyances from the trustees or an interim owner?
Intermediary.
Okay.
And definitely intermediaries. Now, Steve can add to that, but the Slates didn't acquire that land until probably the last half of the 19th century, so the late 1800s. And it was all allotted, as I said, probably no later than 1736. Some of it before that. So that's the thing. We're missing a century and a half of records, probably, where we don't know. The original records might have been bounded by the beach, and later on, landowners just sort of, conveniently extended that to the waterline.
Do you know where those records are or would be, or?
Steve?
Hi, everyone. Jump in here. To answer that question, same places looking, county clerk, recorded, unrecorded, town records, trustee records, various manuscripts, and could be, East Hampton Library, other places. The search continues. I know that this area has been the real focus lately. I'd like to say this about Slate. Right now, it seems that we're all familiar with Captain Rysam, who came into town and died around 1800. And Slates were his family, married his daughter. And he had some pretty big land holdings in that area, I believe all the way to or way past Little Northwest Creek. And he had a big rope walk, which we know would take up, you need to acquire a lot of land. But I think that, trying to find those missing years, just to go back a minute, last time we all spoke, what we did ascertain was that we did accomplish the first mission. Phase one was to identify all of the original title, meaning first time an individual or individuals were given or purchased private property adjoining beaches or water bodies. That was our focus. And we ascertained that there was only one instance. It was 1712, Captain Burnett up there in Cedar Beach, that seemed to have title. Everything else bounded by the beaches. And the key here is the geography. The general rule here is that and I've seen this with the rest of the town, including Napeague, that you have a wide sandy beach. Nobody was granted that. Nobody. You have a narrow beach along a creek or harbor, then the grant went to the water. If you want to, discuss whether it's mean low water or mean high water, that's another story. But that's the case. And we identified as best we could and what was available, the earliest conveyances in what would be the Sag Harbor area, Wegwagonock, all the way to the town bounds.
Steve, let me interrupt. I mean, the problem is we don't have the very earliest allotments in that area in most cases. If we would have the answer to the question.
Well, they were individual allotments. They were not.
Okay. Well, we there may be somewhere we don't know where to place them, but we don't have definitive idea of the first allotments in Sag Harbor.
We have I listed those in the last report. They're in the town and trustee records. One of them cites by the town line with Southampton to the pine tree on the beach. That's a bound. That's a northwest bound.
Right. You had. I remember that. You did have one. There was one at the town boundary.
We know Ananias Conkling, bounded by the beach. There's and to move along here with this, I think that the most critical evidence is appropriately the trustees' own records of regulating seaweed harvesting and along those very beaches that we're discussing right now, well into the 1860s. So to me, that's the real proof is that they're regulating something. If they had conveyed it, well, how could they regulate it? I mean, we know that they were willing to indemnify people going along these beaches with Josiah Kirk and Rogers, the Silas Payne, these litigious individuals trying to claim this title. So, using some deduction, I mean, unless there's some deed out there or conveyance, I mean, the next thing would be really dig deeper into, try to get more probate records, mortgages, so forth. But I feel very confident what we've done our due diligence here, trying to ascertain that.
Well, you and I should go over what other deeds you have in that area, because I didn't think we had enough of a picture of the original allotments to be able to say that confidently. But in any event, our conclusion in this section in the report was that it's inconclusive. I mean, we did not conclude that these beaches are private. We concluded that we don't have enough information.
Yeah. Hey, Rick, at some point, are we going to get a accompanying document showing in map form these the allotments that you're talking about, these divisions?
I have to see all the deeds that Steve has got, but we ought to be able. Yes, the answer is we should be able to provide you with some of the backup documents, deeds, and in a couple cases maps, and show you where that will be on a map. So we can provide that. We should be able to do that before the year is out.
All right, because it's really hard. It's really hard.
I know.
The narrative here.
A map would be a lot easier.
And attach it to a piece of property.
Yep. So let me continue. It gets a little bit easier as we go east. The next question was, this was an early question posed to us, was whether the trustees own Little Northwest Creek. Our conclusion is that trustees do own Little Northwest Creek, although the most modern deeds, including that to the DEC, do not use the creek as kind of a boundary line between properties, like a center line. There was evidence before that, and as recently as the early 1900s, that the creek, the shore of the creek, was the actual boundary line. And Little Northwest Creek is wide enough that if you go to one shore, you're not on the other shore. You can't jump over Little Northwest Creek. And we do a map, for example, we have 1911 filed map of the property at Barcelona Neck. It was owned by the Hunting Estate and by Clarence Hand at the time. That's something that we can add on, as Jim had asked about. We have the 1925 deed when the Slate family sold all the holdings that we were just talking about. Their property did run as far as Little Northwest Creek and Rattlesnake Creek, which is kind of an arm of Little Northwest Creek that comes back towards Route 114. And their property was bounded by the shoreline of Little Northwest Creek. So putting that together, we believe that the trustees own the bottom of Little Northwest Creek, and there's certainly no conveyance or allotment out there that says that they gave it away. Barcelona Neck, the beach on the west side of Barcelona, I still mark that as inconclusive, because unless Steve has got something to surprise you with, I don't think we have the original allotments on the west side of Barcelona to say whether the trustees gave the beach away or not. The northern side of Barcelona Neck, though, we do know the answer to that, and that's from the 10-acre division in 1736. Remember, there were two allotments made at Barcelona in that year, is Lot 34 and Lot 35. They're two of the most significant conveyances or allotments ever, because they were actually very nicely described, and they made it clear that on both sides of the neck there was a road, which we now know is the Old West Side Road and the Old East Side Road. And in the 1980s, when the trustees in the town were fighting with Ben Heller over Barcelona Neck, the trustees had solid evidence that they had not given up those roads. Part of it's the geography of the neck. It's fairly easy to determine where you are, but those were very, very important. And to this day, the trustees, when the state acquired the Barcelona Neck, the state acknowledged that the trustees owned those roads, and you will see them on the tax map. At the northern end, though, in 1736, when the trustees made their allotment in 1736, the northern lot was bounded by the cliff, which we assume means the top of the cliff, which means the trustees own at presumably the cliff, the bluff face, but certainly the beach. So we believe that the trustees have demonstrated that they did not give up the beach that bounds the northern side of Barcelona Neck. Next is Northwest Creek, the Northwest Creek, not Little Northwest Creek. Northwest Creek is clearly a trustee water body. One thing, though, that we didn't expect, but we found, Steve can tell you about it, but Steve did find that when the channel or inlet into Northwest Creek was dredged and moved, I should say, not just dredged, moved in 1961, for reasons that are still a bit obscure, the trustees gave Suffolk County a quitclaim deed for underwater land at the northern end of Northwest Creek. I always thought that was sort of like a typo or something.
Rick, would that have been because if they didn't own it, they wouldn't dredge it?
But they've dredged other water bodies they don't own, the county. Yeah. I don't know, because I don't think they didn't acquire Northwest Harbor County Park at that time. That didn't happen for another decade or so. So it's not like they were saying, well, we want the parkland. I don't know, but they clearly the county made a clear request, and we have correspondence from the trustee's attorney, and the trustees gave the deed. They gave a deed to Suffolk County.
From the documents I gathered for that, including the town attorney and the trustee attorney's correspondences, it basically seemed like, and the trustee minutes, that they didn't want to take on the expense of it, that Suffolk County was willing to do it. So Suffolk County said, we will, but we want title.
And that's the question, is why did the county want title? And that's still kind of, we don't really know.
Probably figured expanding population, recreational activities. More of a
underwater land. It's underwater land.
But adjoining, if you have a parkland, now you own the land underwater adjoining it.
So I guess the good news is I'm not sure Suffolk County knows they really own it. Yeah. I think you guys issue mooring permits in the area, right?
Yeah, there is some cooperation.
But there is a sign there that clearly states that Suffolk County owns it.
Oh, is there?
There's a sign there. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
I think the town has jurisdictional rights, Rick, and the trustees to do the mooring permits and to regulate the speed limit and marine safety.
Well, the speed limit, sure, because you're regulating something on the surface. For sure.
And there's anchorage is under the control of the town, basically within 1,500 feet of the shore. So,
right, okay.
I mean, the ownership, I think they were trying to build a beach there and probably put it in as a mooring area. It was probably the early part of some recreational paradise plan.
Hey, that's as good an answer as we have.
Yeah, at least it's still public property. That's the good news.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so let me continue. The answer then to a lot of these, including what I'm going to hit on next, is that it often doesn't matter much because much of the land we're going to talk about is in fact public, or the adjoining upland is public. But the next section that we address is Barnes Meadow. Just for those who don't know, Barnes Meadow was the tidal marshland, basically between Northwest Landing Road and Mile Hill Road. All right, Mile Hill Road is bordered by some trees on the left-hand side, but once you get beyond that, there's a very, very nice tidal marsh. That's Barnes Meadow. Barnes Meadow was allotted very early in the town records. And in fact, when they did the 1736 land allotments, as they came down that range of lots from the north, to what's now the Grace Estate area, the southern boundary of the range was Barnes Meadow. So we don't have the original conveyances to the water, so we don't know for sure if the trustees own the beach. I would rate that as inconclusive. The meadow itself, though, clearly private. That's why it's called Barnes Meadow. North of there is basically the Grace Estate area, and this is the area, part of this area is where Hosea Kirk fought with the trustees. Now, this is where Steve and I may differ a little bit. This is an area where the allotments, and I think it was lots 20 through 24 in 1736. Again, it was the 10-acre allotment in 1736 where a lot of Northwest Woods was allocated. This, in that range, lots 20 to 24, we know that they're starting in the vicinity of the mouth of Elwye Brook. We know they're going from north to south, and each of the allotments is bounded on the west by the cliff. Not even by the beach, and certainly not by the harbor or the water, but by the cliff. So that ends the question, well, how the hell did, Hosea Kirk win his lawsuit in 1881? All those court papers, and most of them are still available, including the 2 Court of Appeals decisions. And you can read the Court of Appeals decision for yourself. And you don't have to be an attorney for me to tell you that you ain't going to understand it. Because I've read it a number of times, and I still can't make sense of what the freaking Court of Appeals did. It was a stupid decision.
Rick, can I ask a question? Can I just ask a Barnes Meadow question?
Yes.
Too far along. That allotment, did that include the bottom of the creeks that are in there?
So we don't have the allotment. We know from various records, and unless Steve is located, I don't know that we have the original allotment to Barnes. We know from what happened around him that he acquired or was allotted a large part of that meadow. There's nothing to indicate that they made an exception for the creek, because there is a little creek that runs through there. My assumption is that the creek wasn't big enough for them to call it out and retain it. But I've never seen a deed to mention
it. Answer me this if you know it. Is that little creek the original opening, the original, where the original creek into Northwest Creek was originated?
That's a very good question. They were very close. They were very close in location. Now, I happen to have the GIS open, but I think this was 62 aerials after they moved the, before it. They'd already. The short answer, John, is no. I'm looking right now at the 1962 aerial. By the time the 62 aerial was done, the county had already done the dredging, and they had filled in the east inlet, the original inlet to Northwest Creek, and they moved it. but you can see the creek coming out of Barnes Meadow, and it's very clearly a separate waterway.
Okay. All right.
They were close. In other words, the mouth of Northwest Creek and the mouth of the creek coming out of Barnes Meadow were close, but they were two different channels.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
I found and sent Darlene a deed for Barnes Meadow lot. It's from L. Nathan Parsons to Daring Ranger in 1830, and it's referred to as the Barnes Meadow lot. No water bodies cited as bounds or anything like that, but it is cited as private conveyance.
Do they say, do you know the acreage? Do you know how large the acreage was of that deed?
What's that?
Do you know the acreage in the deed, Steve?
Yeah, I think it was fairly small. It was 4 acres. I'll take a look.
Okay.
Might be 10.
Yeah, I mean, the meadow itself is probably 30 or 40 acres.
But it is named. It is named as such.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like different people at different times. I mean, I'm not stating that the original Barnes, I can't remember who it was. I'm not, we don't know that he owned all the meadow. What we know is he got his name attached to it. So the next section is basically from Mile Hill Road up to L.Y. Brook Road. So I'm just going to count the Kirk's decision as an outlier. In that area, the 1736 allotments are very clear. They did not go to the bay. They did not go to the harbor. They only went as far as the cliff. It's maybe moot today. We hope it is. We don't really know for sure. Obviously, the town owns about a third or a quarter to a third of that shoreline in the Grace Estate. It also has a lot of restrictions over the shoreline in the Grace Estate subdivision. At the very northern end, though, you do have 4 lots that are on the front on the bay that are in Lighthouse Landing. That's Terry Road. And at the southern end, you have the settlement in Northwest. That's the former Camp St. Regis property. And, all I can say is that the subdivisions don't recognize trustee ownership, but, I don't agree because we know that the original land allotments did not go to the bay. So unless somebody wants to relitigate the Kirk case, I would say the trustees should assert ownership of that beach. And going north, the issue is really very much the same when you come to Cedar Point and then around Cedar Point. Again, we're dealing a lot, the Cedar Point Park is county parkland, so it's not really a big issue that county's not excluding the public from the beach or anything like that. As you go around to the north side, though, we're dealing with what's called Hedges Banks. That's the tall bluffs on the north side of Cedar Point Park. And then as you go eastward, you come to a bunch of subdivisions, Landfall, Bay Colony, North Hollow. Those are the ones that Hedges Banks Drive runs along, kind of parallel to the shore there. That area, that's another range. I forget the number. I forget the lot numbers in that one, but that is also called out in the 1736 allotments with, good clarity. And the allotments went to the cliff. So they definitely did not go down to the bay. They don't include the water. I mean, they didn't go to the water. So my take is that the trustees own the beach along Hedges Banks. That's all the way from the base of Cedar Point to, presumably to the vicinity of Old House Landing Road. And that's based, again, on the 1736 allotments.
So Rick, do you have any idea what the subdivisions, the subdivision ownership claimed? Is this
in one case I do. I have to go back and check, John. I didn't check Landfall or North Hollow, but I know that when they got to Bay Colony, which is the one in between those two, this is in the mid-1980s, and the trustees made a point of noting to the planning board at that time that they believed that they owned the bluff there, and that subdivision specifically recognizes trustee ownership. In fact, the trustees might even have gotten a quitclaim deed from that developer. It's only a short section of road, a short section on Hedges Banks Drive, but I believe there was a deed. I think I'm looking for it on here, see if I can find out. But there, the developer of the subdivision acknowledged trustee ownership. Yeah, here it is. It's got a tax map number too. So that's Bay Colony. That's the. It's only two lots fronting on the bluff there, but that the developer acknowledged trustee ownership of the bluff as well as the beach.
Right. Okay.
I'd like to jump in here for a second and make a very critical point regarding subdivision maps that I'm sure many of you or all have experience with, but it's such an important point that it's worth stating. When you look at these subdivision maps and they adjoin things like beaches and so forth, when you read it, it appears that it's all part of the same parameter. But the reason very often that they do this is not so much a title claim, it's more of a square footage claim to be able to get zoning matter, to be able to get more perhaps lots on the property and so forth. So I am not a fan of maps in terms of I make them, but I don't trust them. I personally, when I'm out surveying, if I see looks like an easement cutting through a property, I'll locate it. Doesn't mean that I know who owns it, if it's a part of this or not. So the key is the written documentations, these conveyances that we're finding in a trustee records, which are just as valid as any recorded deed in Riverhead. That's something everybody needs to be aware. And Rick proved it by the diligence of the trustees back in 1985 to state that, because that area that they said, no, it's ours. Think about that. That excludes the square footage of the total subdivision. So again, it's not necessarily a nefarious land grab that a subdivision might include something that's not theirs. It's really more of a zoning matter. But bear that in mind.
Just to add to what Steve was saying, you could imagine back in the 1800s or even the early 1900s, if somebody had a quote unquote waterfront property and it was bounded by the beach, and the next guy comes along and wants to buy it from him, it's not much, to a layman, whether you're bounded by the beach or by the water line, it's the same thing, right? Well, legally, of course, it's not the same thing, but you can imagine how easy it was. No one's checking the deeds. Trustees weren't, checking people's deeds in the 1800s to find out if they, if on conveyance they ran their property boundary now along the Menai water line instead of along the bluff or the beach. So it was very easy to get creep on these things and to basically take over the beach. Now, look, there are places in the town, none of them are in Northwest, where the trustees later on did actually sell the beach. There are some examples. A good example is the Bell Estate, where they actually sold and deeded the beach to Dr. Bell. But unless there's an actual conveyance from the trustees to the beach, which is very rare, the beach is probably still owned by the trustees.
We're not finding those. Countless hours.
In Northwest, we don't have any.
Nothing.
In Northwest, we don't have any where the trustees specifically conveyed to the water line that we know of.
My feeling on that area east of Sag Harbor towards Full Northwest Creek is, as I said, I believe Rysam, big, wealthy, generous landowner, had it. I don't think he bothered anybody. Therefore, the trustees didn't have to flex their muscle in forcing things. Conversely, later in the 1850s is when we see them have to do that. Edmund Rogers up there. Up in Northwest, he's the first. Then, of course, we know
that's the Racing area next to Kirk.
Right.
The seaweed battles began.
Right. So if you combine those things, a lack of us finding after countless hours searching and deciphering, not finding these conveyances by the trustees to these people, whether it's 1700, 1750, 1800, 1850, but now we're finding deeds that include the beach. That's what I've been spending so much time trying to say, wait a second, where did that occur? that's what we've been working on. That's right.
And that's that's the one thing. Let me just say, the one thing we haven't found so far is a smoking gun. It would be interesting, but to the best of my knowledge, Steve has not located one where, let's say you have a deed in 1840. I'm just making this up, that went to the beach, and then when that guy sells it in 1870, it goes to the water line. It would be very interesting to find an example of that, and they're out there probably. But
I think we have plenty of them.
No, one where you saw a conveyance that went to the beach, and then the next deed goes to the water.
Well, that's We
haven't found that, as far as I know.
Right.
So anyway, the idea, just to sum up, the idea here is, if you needed site-specific, property-specific information, you'd have to do a deeper dive than we've done, because we're looking at this entire area. What the report is intended to give you is an idea as to whether or not you, the trustees, own or do not own the beach, or in some cases, the waterways. Hopefully, none of these things will ever become issues, and no future board of trustees will have to delve into it any further. But if it did, if a dispute arose somewhere in this section of coast, you'd have a starting point where somebody could do a more detailed analysis and, hopefully go back and try to find as many deeds in the chain of title as they could and try to resolve an issue definitively.
Oh, Rick, that's great. Thank you very much. It's been really, really interesting. And I'm sure there will be isolated situations where the trustees might want to do some more research on certain areas. I think everyone learned a lot from this, and it was a big undertaking. In the future, if we did it, I think smaller bites might be more manageable. But it was really, really interesting. And I'm looking forward to seeing the ultimate maps that are produced. And a little more compilation of the appendix, and then maybe there's an opportunity for the board to collaborate with you guys again. So I hope that happens.
You guys will definitely get some big maps, and I'd like to come out there and give them to you. The first would be really what we set out to do, laying the foundation of what were the original conveyances to the critical areas adjoining beaches and bodies of water within this scope, which is a huge scope, 4.5 mile range we took on. And I've been trying to break it down into smaller pieces, giving Arlene the actual deeds with those specific areas, trying to, make them as understandable as possible. But as Rick Whalen had said, we got a 400-year in between. So we have the first ones, easily can have the present day, obviously, but we have a good number in between, 1850, 1800, 1900, 1950. So the second map will be not the foundation of those original allotments, but also later things that are more pertinent that we're discussing. So you will have at least two.
All right, now I'll work with Steve to see if we can put that on in a fashion where, you get a map with some sort of a reference to the relevant deeds, and then we can highlight the part of the deed. You don't have to read it all; just here's the part that deals with the shore frontage.
And I'd like to thank Rick Drew for all his efforts with this. He's really spent a lot of time discussing with me on the phone, leadership. Town's very lucky, and all of you, I thank all of you, and working with Rick, it's been a great collaboration, and it's important. It's not easy. I'm sure you guys have some frustrations. It's taken a while. It's a massive, massive project, but we have a lot of information, and we have a great understanding. And I do think if you are ever challenged on anything in that 4.5 mile scope, they're in a good position to be able to reconstruct that. If you want to reconstruct each one, full chains of titles, we could go back to original title. We have that. So that's really a matter for you guys to think about and discuss. But I absolutely believe in it. So thank you.
Hey, thanks, Steve.
I'd like to thank both both of you, Rick and Steve, for this wonderful reporting. And it's very thorough. It's fascinating information for the public to know. Uh-oh. But I want to thank you. It's a very intricate and detailed information for our whole community to know what the trustees own and the history of it. So thank you so very much. It's been
Thank you, Susan. And also, I just want Rick, I've enjoyed working with you, so thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks very much. It's been a lot of fun. And as I said, I do hope the future boards will continue to work with you guys in some capacity. There's a lot of mystery out there and a lot of good information. So it's an interesting story.
Yeah, it was a great initiative. So thank you, Rick, for bringing it to
My
the
question is, would you two guys have any interest in continually working your way east?
Where?
Working our way east.
Work your way east.
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
Well, we'll talk about with you.
Yeah.
I think, as we said, though, I think my proposal would be to really, as you said, break it down. I would propose we do it a smaller geographic scope, agree on a set number of hours in a month, a fair rate for everyone, and at the end of each month, produce a report with all the findings and a cartographic representation. I think this one was, the Gardener's Island one that I did was a lot of work, and that was one island with one owner. This was a challenge, a good one, but I think for everybody. And again, I know you're frustrated because it's difficult to envision, and it would help cartographically, but we will have that.
You love what you do, though, Steve and Rick. You're a good team together.
Oh, he loves doing this stuff.
So
I think
I think we got a few more projects in our future.
Yeah, and I just think it's great for the public as well, to have this information.
It all comes down to the records, and trustees have good records. And again, by deduction, we work so hard trying to find, did the trustees convey? We don't see it. Did the trustees regulate and enforce and back up people on those beaches? Yes, and the bodies of water. So if you put those two things together, it tells you that the trustees did their job.
Yeah.
And we continue to do it.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks,
All right.
guys.
Thanks.
Have a great
Everybody
holiday.
have a wonderful
Have a great
holiday.
holiday.
Merry
Great
Christmas.
holiday.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
All right. Matt, do we have anybody else in the waiting room?
You have 0 callers on the line, and we do have someone in the waiting room under a phone number, not an ID. So let me
Find out who they are.
Yes, I'm going to do that right now.
Okay.
It might be Mark or Peter Mendelman.
Okay, I did unmute them, but they're still muted.
Did you get a name?
No, there's still no name on the call.
Can they hear me or no?
Well, if they're listening in, they should be able to. There might be a delay,
Okay.
but
Call it. Do you need wish to speak to the board? No response.
Is it the 329-9805 number? Is that the caller?
yes.
They are muted.
Probably John Aldred.
Yeah.
It's not my number.
All right, let's move on to, we don't have any new business. Let's go to old business. Update on a request from Mark Mendelman on behalf of Harbor Marina, Inc. regarding application for 10-year maintenance permit.
I don't see that on my agenda. Interesting.
Well, we discussed this. Mark and Peter presented this to us at a previous meeting. They're asking for a 10-year maintenance permit to maintain pilings, bulkheads, floating docks, piers, ramps, and the reclamation dredging necessary 10 feet seaward of any bulkhead work. All this to be done over the next 10 years. The conditions, they'll inform us each year of the work to be done in that year. And I believe I sent around the application to everybody after the last meeting to review. I'm personally comfortable with this. I think, however, what we have to determine is what kind of fee structure we might put in place for this. Right now, as far as I understand, there's one application here, which was submitted with a $100 application fee. And are we going to leave it at that and not charge anything else for the intervening years? Or are we interested in imposing some kind of a charge each year for review of work to be done that year?
Hey, John.
Yes, Rick.
Historically, it was a 1 year or 3 year permit. Do you have any history on that and the cost of the permit?
I've seen it done differently in the time I've been here. It's either been from an emergency permit to replace 3 or 4 pilings that had broken off, which was a regular permit, $100 permit. And I believe we granted a 3-year maintenance permit for some specific work at 3 Mile Harbor Marina a couple of years ago.
Right.
I think that was just a one-time permit fee. But I guess, what I'm seeing is that this is probably going to be the beginning of other applications we get to do long-term maintenance. The marina owners are interested in not having to come back to us every year with a new survey and full-on application and all that stuff and relitigate this whole issue. And also dovetail, a 10-year permit from the trustees with the 10-year permits that the DEC is granting for this similar work.
This work involved with the office, it could be an administrative fee to review the past, review the progress of the permit. I don't think $100 a year would be unreasonable.
Well, the timing is great because we're just going into our organizational meeting next month. So,
did we not discuss instead of a 10-year permit, a 5-year permit? I thought that was also discussed.
It was discussed.
I'm not sure what the advantage there is, Susan. I mean, this is a long-range plan that will be reviewed in some way every year.
Mm-hmm.
5 years or 10 years.
No, I think it makes it's administratively easier for everyone all the way around. I just wanted to raise that because I think we had discussed that as well. Okay.
Yeah, I think in the intervening years, there won't have to be new plans filed or new surveys.
Mm-hmm. So it makes it more streamlined. I understand.
I think I was the one who brought up the idea of splitting it into 5 years, but we actually hold 10-year permit with DEC. So I don't know why we should have to put different constraints on others.
I agree. Yeah, and you were in fact the person who did bring up the 5-year. Yeah.
I think it can be managed well.
Mm-hmm.
So what about what about the cost here? I mean, that's kind of where
well, I think that's a pretty severe loss of income. If these start being the thing, we're cutting our income down by 90% if we just do a one-time fee. So I'm with Bill. I think you go the $100 a year, and it could be payable, each year.
I think there's a savings on the other administration of making copies of surveys and other things that Bill pointed out. So, maybe it's still a net gain for the operator to not have to go through the bureaucracy of an annual renewal process.
Right.
Mhm. Agree. I think that makes sense.
I'm not sure.
I don't think it's onerous to do an annual fee.
John?
Well, I wasn't sure what your argument was, Rick, or not your argument, but your point. Just
that an annual process comes with a cost, and you're eliminating some of that paperwork and effort by doing the 10-year permit. So I think there is a benefit, and maybe there could be some kind of a reasonable renewal fee that isn't onerous. You mean
there's a savings to the trustees?
Well, there's a savings to the applicant and the trustees.
Right.
From an administrative commitment.
Well, that's where I see the breakdown in the decision. It's a $100 fee for an application. There's something less than an application in the intervening years. Do we keep the yearly fee at $100 a year, which means it's $10,000 over 10 years? Or do we keep it at $100 application fee and then, $50, $75 a year for the next 9 years?
Well, here's the other thing. I would think over a 10-year period, those fees are going to change. And I don't think they're going to come down. They're going to increase. So there's also the savings over time, where at 10 years, it's stuck at the one cost. You know what I'm saying? Kind of hedging on future costs.
Right.
So is it?
Keep it constant, but they don't have inflationary costs.
Correct.
And what are you thinking? $100? Is that?
Yeah, I'm still thinking $100 a year.
I would say
someone comes in for a 5-year, it would be, $500 over the 5 years.
I think if it was a 5-year permit that we'd approve, we'd collect the $500 up front, and then there'd be an annual fee as well. I think that's. I mean, it's still not that much for what's happening. I think that's very fair.
Do you own rental properties?
No.
Well, there is a significant savings for the applicant when they don't have to create a new survey, which is very costly.
Yeah.
So I think that we should consider that.
I mean, I like the 100 a year. I think that's something that's manageable and in line with our historic fees.
I'm with that.
Just keep it on a kayak, right?
All right. Well,
is this something we want to vote on now, or?
I don't see why not. I mean, I'm not sure what we're going to do, and
so we'll be approving the permit also. So
right.
And I have to recuse myself from this vote as I am an employee of the company.
So I'll make a motion that we approve this permit for a 10-year maintenance permit. And
now do we have an actual application, John?
Yeah, yes, we do.
Description of the work?
Yeah, he said he sent it out.
Yes, we do.
Let me see.
We received it on October.
Okay,
20th.
yeah, I have the surveys here and everything.
I'll second the motion. Now, are we doing, hey, John, are you doing that motion to include the $100 a year as the fee?
Yes, which would be a permit condition, I guess.
All right, I'll second that.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right, Deepwater Winds Fisheries Study. John, you on for that also?
This is weird.
Sure. So we met with representatives from Orsted and Stony Brook and Cornell last week to discuss the fisheries study and got some kind of an update on, where they're at with it. We had some discussions regarding the timelines of their Orsted's proposed work schedule and how that might complement or dovetail with the details of the study. And we had some discussions regarding the missed spring data collection from last spring, which was one of our disappointments, actually. So with respect to the telemetry aspect of the study, the receivers have been put out and they've been collecting data since the summer. The information that they're collecting and have been collecting and will be collecting will be first downloaded in about March. So that'll be a group of data that we'll be able to take a look at. That'll go back to when they first set out the receivers. They've embarked on a new mooring system for the receivers in the ocean. As you recall, there were some fishing boats that picked up and ran into, and in some cases picked up some of the anchors that were holding the receivers, picked up the receivers as well, did some damage to their nets and some of the superstructure of the boats. So this new system uses a much lighter anchor. That anchor can be lifted, and the previous system basically used very heavy concrete blocks as anchors. And they were, once a receiver was retrieved from the anchor, the next receiver that got put down was going to be put down with a new anchor. So over the course of the study in that particular location, there would have been several anchors that were left on the bottom and would stay there and be a hazard until they buried themselves in the sand. So as a result of some of the problems that they had, they're embarking on this new anchoring system. The anchor will be able to be pulled up with the receiver and then drop back down. So it's really just one anchor that'll be in place over the course of the study, and then that anchor can be removed at the end of the study, and there'll be nothing on the bottom. That anchor is also 300 pounds lighter than the cement block anchors. So if one of them is trapped in a net, it hopefully won't do that much damage. There are over 700 tags that are actively transmitting data somewhere in the North Atlantic Ocean. So they're continuing to tag, and they'll be tagging more next spring as well. There are, if you maybe recall from their presentation last spring, there are 3 real-time receivers that are part of this this array of receivers. Each of those receivers are about a kilometer offshore. And this type of receiver has a floating component in it that will send a signal to a satellite and then be able to be seen in real time, similar to the Georgica Pond telemetry buoy that Dr. Gobler gets his real-time data from. So there's 3 of those out in the ocean. They're foam coated with epoxy, so they're not a very hard structure. So if they're hit, hopefully there won't be any damage to the boat. They each have a red blinking light on it as well that can be seen. So Stony Brook people were a little bit concerned that might cause some problems for some people on the beach. So, we're talking about it and letting people know that if they see a red blinking light a kilometer offshore, it's likely a telemetry buoy that's collecting data for the fisheries study for the Ørsted project. We also, they will provide us the coordinates of those real-time buoys, and we'll post that to our website, and we'll also provide it to Bonnie Brady for dissemination to the fleet. Let's see. So I think that's kind of a summary of the update that we got. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Francis or Jim.
No, I think you pretty much covered it.
Yeah.
We're all a little bit disappointed that the study didn't kick off quite the way it was originally described, but I think the conversation that we did have with the academics, I felt that there was every effort was being made to sort of fill in any gaps that we're having here.
Yeah, I think so too. And I had an afterthought after the meeting that maybe we can continue this discussion a little bit with the academics and Ørsted and talk about perhaps, something additional that can be added to this study that might perhaps mitigate the loss of that spring data and glean some more information somehow at the end of the study that'll, I don't know, maybe in some way make up for what's been lost. But that's for further discussion.
Well, I'm glad to see that they're doing something about the anchor situation. I think it would also be helpful for just another additional wavelength of getting the information out there beyond Bonnie Brady. Maybe if we could have Bonnie Brady pass it along to the DEC so the DEC can send a card to all food fish holders for New York State, as they do with any permit allocation changes throughout the year. We get notifications monthly from the DEC, and it would be helpful to not just have kind of a wireless coconut of Bonnie Brady and crew. I think the DEC could put a card out to the fishermen.
Yeah.
What percentage of those people that receive those cards do you think are dragger fishermen, Mike?
Well, what percentage are dragger fishermen? I don't know what percentage are not fishermen at all, but at least in the last 6 months, I know fishermen that just aren't in touch with Bonnie Brady and they're not part of that network, so they wouldn't get the intel.
Hey, John, there is a wide subscribership to the DEC updates. I get them myself. I know a lot of my friends do as well. So it's definitely well targeted to the fishing community.
All right. Well, we can talk to them about reaching out to the DEC to disseminate this information as well.
Thank you, John.
sounds good.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Hey, John, how long is this fishing study going on for?
5 years. This is the first year. There'll be two. There's 2 years pre-construction. This is the first year going into the second year. Then there's 1 year of construction. And then there's 2 years post-construction. And post-construction is when the cable is charged and operating.
Okay.
So the main thrust of the study is to determine behavioral differences in the migration patterns of the fish, before and after the cable is activated. It's mainly for, the EMF effect on the fish. So one additional thing I should probably mention in terms of the construction schedule, I think it's been out there, but just to review it a little bit, the onshore work is going to begin probably next month on Beach Lane. The horizontal directional drilling, the drilling of the conduit under the beach and out to the exit pit, which is like a little less than 2,000 feet offshore, is expected to, that horizontal directional drilling is expected to punch into the exit pit, which will then already have to have been dug sometime around December of 2022. So there'll be work going on in the ocean next early winter. And the cable burying, the cable deployment, which includes the trenching and laying of the cable, including into the conduit and up to the vault on shore, is going to be taking place somewhere in the March 2022 time range. So that period, that basically winter of 2022, there'll be construction activity taking place alongside the data collection. So there'll have to be some close coordination between Ørsted and especially the trawl survey in order that the two don't conflict and give us, erroneous data. So that was something that was brought out actually in the meeting we had last week, and I don't think was really, had been anticipated by both sides yet. So I think it's not a bad idea for us to revisit with these group meetings, two or three or times a year or maybe quarterly, just to make sure everybody's on the same page going forward.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's it.
John?
Anyone else? Okay, thanks, John. Update on the dredging of Little Northwest Creek?
Yeah, I didn't get over there today, but I did speak to Pat Bistrian a little bit, and I think they got a couple more days over there to finish up.
Good. Tim took a very nice picture, which I am going to put up on our website. I have it right here if anybody wants to see it. I'm going to take a drive by and see it myself.
Hey, Jim, is that timeline going to include some spreading to the west to fill in the beach a little bit?
No, Rick. I think it's excavation. He's got, I think, about a day and a half of excavation left over there. And no, there's going to be some. Clearly, they've got to basically do some spreading in that.
Yeah, nice. That went really well, Jim. Good job.
Well, it'll be a lot better if we get the confirmation that we've got the grant.
Yeah. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah. And with the tide situation, there won't be anybody over there tomorrow until probably about noonish. So if you go by there and you don't see a machine working first thing in the morning, that's what's going on.
Gotcha. Thank you.
But you know what's interesting is, in the excavating that they've done, I have not seen one live clam or that coming out of there. Lots of shells, but
thick with soft.
No, lots of shells, but I've not, other than a few worms, nothing live.
That's too bad.
Tim and I got some a call. This might be a year, I think at least a year ago, from somebody in that neighborhood that was concerned. He went down there and quite often dug soft clams for an aquarium, and he said he couldn't find any. We went down there and dug around. I found a few soft clams, but not too many. So I didn't really, pursue it because I didn't have any background data on what was there before that. But
well, it looked like, John, there was a pretty decent clam population there. If you dug down, it was basically beyond that, the surface dredge. But when they dug down, there was a lot of shells and stuff in there. And all the material coming out of there is clean, with the exception of the very beginning of the excavation, where they went through the sand and got into a little bit of mucky stuff where they stopped. Right. It's all been real sandy.
Right. Well, hopefully this opening it up will help the clam population.
Well, let's hope. Either way, it looks pretty cool.
Okay.
All right. Kayak rack, end of season compliance.
Is Allison on the phone by any chance?
Maybe that was Allison's phone number.
I'm here.
She is here.
Allison, you may be the best one to give this report.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but the Marine Patrol Jay Sharon had done a patrol and found some kayaks remaining after the removal deadline of the 15th on, I believe, Settlers Landing, a few at Louse Point, and he has received from Arlene and I the names of those permit holders so that he could contact them and just let them know that they have, I believe, and Arlene can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he was going to give them the next month to make sure they're removed. Otherwise, they were going to be impounded. I could be getting that wrong, but that's pretty much what the last email said that he had given to us after we sent them the permit holders' names.
Yeah, that's kind of what I recall from that email as well.
Yeah, and then there
were quite a few kayaks at Settlers Landing. So that seems to be a problem spot. So I think we also asked, we're going to keep a list of the people who've, left their kayaks there, just to, check, make sure they're not going to have repeat offenders that we overlook over the years.
Yes, I will make sure that we save those offenders, so to speak.
Right.
Okay. Thanks, Allison. Committee reports, Conic Estuary Program update.
I was just looking through this. I think the last meeting that I attended, and I think, John, you were there, was November 17th for Conic Estuary Partnership. And this was all about the hardening of the shoreline. And I think I sent out a link if you were interested in reviewing it to the board. But more recently, I've been in touch with Dr. Joyce Novak, who heads PEP, and I've asked her to meet with us to come to speak to the board next month when things are a little more firmed up about the aquaponic Harbor Salt Marsh Restoration Plan. And she has some very good news from Suffolk County that there is startup money to begin the process of actually planning with a core group of people that Dr. Nicole Marr wants to work with us on this. So she'll come and present that next month in more detail. And that's about it. She's got some very good news for us, and I'm excited about it. And John, if you want to add to this discussion about PEP. My voice is bothering me.
No, no, I don't have any additional information.
Okay. So that's it for that moment.
Okay, thank you. Education?
Tomorrow, Ben, are you free tomorrow? I had sent out an email.
Yeah, it's at 10:45.
10:45.
At the high school?
At the high school.
Okay.
Okay. There's an appointment tomorrow. We're going to meet with Lynn Brown with regard to the high school award ceremony and the scholarship fund. I think we need to change it around just a little bit. I have sent out the information from the organizations, there's my list here, that contribute to the scholarship fund. And some of the people, some of the organizations have a little more detail to their requirements. And I think that we should explore those. And I had asked that you look through them and see what is similar, what we think we should include. One of the things that we have discussed is having the, and Lynn Brown brought this up, is having the requirement include a financial family portrait so that we can really attract the families and the students, or to attract the students that are truly in need. And that is how this fund was originally set up by Captain Rysam, to provide for students who otherwise might not have the opportunity to go to school. And I apologize for my voice. I don't know what's going on with it. But so there are some things that I think we should hone in on and really get students to apply who are also knowledgeable about what the trustees do, and give us some more descriptive detail about why the trustees are important to our community, so that there's an educational aspect to this for each applicant as well. So I'm looking forward to talking with Lynn tomorrow at the school, and then we'll come back for the in January and have things. I have to submit all the paperwork by the 17th of December. So that's it. And I'll see you tomorrow, Ben.
All right, thank you. Move on to administrative payment of the bills. Staples, $401.28. Optimum, $151.87. Norwalkie Smith LP CPA, $6,717.44 for the annual audit. Hodgson Russ, we have a little bit left over for legal services on South Fork Wind, that total $4,487. We also have legal services regarding Truck Beach. That comes to $36,520.54. Van Dyke and Hand, CPA, $390 for the preparation of payroll tax returns for Q3 2021. Going back to that Hodgson Russ, that invoice was actually over $40,000. I think it was about $42,000, and he gave us a courtesy discount. So,
Francis,
I have a motion to pay the bills.
Francis,
Yeah.
my sheet here says $4,390 for the Van Dyke in hand. Is that a typo on my sheet?
That was a typo, yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's $390.
Okay. I'll make a motion, we pay the bill.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Financials through November 30th, 2021. Anyone have a chance to review?
Francis, I took a look at them and they appear to be in order. They do reflect some grant money proceeds and dredging material receipts that contributed nicely to the financials, and everything looks to be in order month over month from the last set of financials. I would make a motion to approve them.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, approved. And renewal of a CD account ending in 7248.
Make a motion
Motion,
to
Marina.
roll it over.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Report of the clerk. I have a couple of items here. We had a request come in right around the deadline of the agenda being published, so we're going to do it under the report of the clerk. Request from Susan Stadler to add her daughter, Carly Drew, to her lease at 191 Shore Road, Lot 29S in Lazy Point. I don't know that Chris has had the opportunity to review this. I think not. He's been away.
I did receive a copy of it from Allison or Arlene or both, and all the documents were there in the application to do that.
Well, Susan, do you want to make a motion that if the paperwork is in order, that we approve this?
Does this have to be posted in the public notices at all?
I don't know.
It's supposed to be posted for 3 weeks, right?
She's just adding Carly to it.
Yeah, this is
not a transfer.
It's not a transfer per se, but you know what? Yeah. Rick, is there some urgency on this, or can this be tabled until Chris can look it over? I'd like to make a motion to table it and let our counsel look it over, make sure it's in order. I'm sure this will be fine.
Rick, did you say it was or was not urgent?
It is not.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
I have it
So
right here.
table for Chris. Okay. Also, we had the results of the annual Georgia Capon dredging request for bids. I have to dig that out, guys. Sorry. Okay. So we only had one bidder that came in. Fisheries Materials Inc., 175 Springs Fireplace Road. They gave us a bid of per cubic yard of $9.50 for item one, which was the main portion of the dredging. And for the smaller portion, I guess that's the
bottleneck. Yeah.
Yeah, the bottleneck area. They gave us a bid of $2.50 per cubic yard. So,
Jim, how does that play out on the valuations on the market? What do you think? Is that a reasonable offer?
We're doing all right with this. There's no reason for the trustees to complain about this. As long as, the contractor's got a market for the sand, which it looks like there's some properties that have typically needed sand will need it again. I think this is good for all parties.
Yeah, this looks good.
What's the reason that the bottleneck cost is so much less? Is it a lesser grade material?
No, it's a matter of access. It's considerably more costly to excavate that sand. And quite honestly, I don't know that this year whether we really need to pull any sand out of that. They did a pretty good grab last year. And I'm not sure that they could really reach going farther north in that bottleneck from where it is right now. You can only get up to like the edge of Klein's property there.
Right.
Once you get past that, the beach narrows there. You're pushing into Macklow, and I'm not sure whether, they've reached as far as they probably feasibly can with the excavator.
And they can only dig from the south side. They can't dig from the north.
No access. You don't have any. The only accesses on the other side of that creek would be from those Chauncey Close properties. And at this point, there is no access there. That's been closed off.
Okay.
So do I have a motion to accept the bid?
Motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Francis,
what? Go ahead.
if I can just add something to the clerk's report, I circulated a questionnaire about doing some little maintenance work over at the parking area over there in Wainscott, just to give better public access into Georgia Pond. That work will probably occur in the next week or so.
You sure it didn't happen yet?
No, I don't think they
There was
did.
something funky going on there late last week.
If there's something funky going on there, it wasn't me.
Okay. All right. All right. Last thing I have is schedule the organizational meeting. Talking with LTV, we have 2 dates available. The town is celebrating Christmas Day on New Year's Day on January 3rd. However, that doesn't mean we can't meet via Zoom, and LTV is available. The other date available would be January 5th, which is the Wednesday. What's our preference?
Either January 3rd or the 5th?
Yes. When are you back, Jim?
I'm back the 4th. I could probably do Zoom on the 3rd.
It'd be easier on the 5th or no?
No, I'll be actually in Baltimore on the 5th.
Okay.
I like the 3rd, personally.
Anybody else? Anyone
Yeah,
opposed to the 3rd?
I liked the 10th.
I did too.
That's too late. Anyone opposed to the 3rd? Okay, we'll get to see Jim's house in Ireland.
All right.
You get to see the inside of a pub in Ireland.
Oh, that works. That works.
I'm going to add one more thing, if I may, Francis, because I was looking for this in my pile of goodies from PEP with Dr. Joyce Novak. She had written to me at the end of November, and I just wanted to run this by our board that she has a completed inventory of hardened structures. So as we go forward with our surveying as a board of various of the docks in our waterways, she said that the docks in the Conic watershed, a whole list of them through the GIS data, which is available to us. And I think this might be a helpful item to utilize as we go forward. She's seeking to have it ground truthed for verification. So she'd like to work with us and allow us to use this information, which I think is probably going to be very helpful to us. So that was my other thing I forgot to mention.
That's really useful.
Yeah, this probably should be coordinated with natural resources, who might be doing some of this work as well.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Anybody have anything else?
No, I'd like to make a motion to close the meeting.
Can we just say
Merry Christmas.
that Merry Christmas and
Everybody.
Happy New Year? And thank you, everybody here, for all the hard work that we've done together and separately. And so I just want to say it's been a swell year. And
Good night.
thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Good night, guys.
Holidays, everyone.
Good night. Thank you, Matt. Have a great
Good night.
Christmas.
Oh, yeah. Good.
Merry
Oh, Matt
Christmas.
has
Thank you.
Wonderful Christmas bells. Matt. All right. How do I
Thank you,
turn this
everybody.
off? Okay. Good night.